On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks fall short again and really continue on the treadmill of mediocrity as they flip-flop back and forth, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, and then today a loss again on the road in Brooklyn. We'll have a full breakdown what transpired and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1442 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you on a Friday evening, and today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, special sports partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn right now to get started. And today's episode is also one that reminds you to make us your first listen each and every day. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify. We're also on the video side over on YouTube, Google Play, etc. And we do thank you for listening to the podcast as always. We'll dive in now to what became a 124-107 loss for the Hawks, and the flip-flopping continues for Atlanta. With this loss, now below 500 again at 38-39 on the season, the ninth consecutive game where the Hawks have either won or lost back and forth, going back and forth, winning losses, alternating. And famously, the Hawks now have an NBA record still in being within one game of 500. They've been within one game of 500 since January 21st. It's been more than 2 months. And at this point, they have to win out in their last 5 games just to match last season's record. And if you remember this, last year was seen as a massive disappointment for the Hawks that prompted big changes like trading for DeJounte Murray. And this year they have to win out in the last 5 games, which is not likely. It's not impossible, but certainly not what you would pick at this point to even get to that point they were at last year. So not a whole lot of great vibes on this night. I kind of joked about this on Twitter today, but I felt like the sort of the day of the take. A lot of Hawks fans are very frustrated, it seems, at this point in time, which I understand for sure, but I'm taking it out on the Hawks in different ways and having some strong opinions at this point in time. I'm sure they got even worse after the game tonight. And we'll get into the game now. And basically, the Hawks led this game by 8 points 3 times in the first half, had a rough stretch late in the first half, and then got walloped in the third quarter to break it open, 42-24 in favor of Brooklyn in the third, and that was kind of the end of the game unofficially, and then it became pretty official in a hurry before the Hawks pulled the plug with about 4 minutes to go in the game. Plenty of issues on this one. Both ends of the floor, honestly, but we'll start with the defense, as we are wont to do when the Hawks usually are losing. The Hawks gave up almost a 140 offensive rating to the Nets in the competitive portion, at least the somewhat competitive portion, before the Hawks really pulled the plug at the very end of this game. Brooklyn ended up shooting 15 of 33 from three. That was the headliner of the night for sure from the Nets. 36% from the floor is also fantastic. They had 33 assists and 13 turnovers to Brooklyn in this game. The Hawks did have some strong signs on the glass, and they only allowed 13 free throw attempts. The rest of it, though, was pretty bad defensively. Some of this, I want to stress some of it, not all of it, could be a hat tip to the Nets, who shot the ball great in this game. Mikal Bridges was fantastic. He had 42 points. He's been out of his mind for about the last month. But it wasn't only him. They shot it great in this game, but still the Hawks had all kinds of issues defensively. If you watch the tape back, they allowed a lot of good looks in this game without DeAndre Hunter in the mix, as he was injured in this game. The Hawks were down probably their best perimeter defender, and that he wasn't going to solve it. Obviously, he's been on the floor for some bad defensive performances in recent past, but without Hunter, it's even worse, even more dire for the Hawks defensively in terms of talent on the perimeter, and it was really, really rough in this one. Around the rim, not as bad, but still combined, basically the Hawks giving up a lot of good shots with a good shot-making team, and you had bad results on the defensive end of the floor. Offensively, it wasn't pretty either. Hawks, the big thing, I'll just get this out of the way now. The Hawks were 8 of 37 from three in this game. At one point in the second half, I had this, I wrote it down, I'm looking at it right now. The Hawks were 4 of 26 from three, and the Nets were 14 of 26. So do the math on that. That means the Nets had the same amount of attempts as the Hawks at one point in the second half and had made 10 more of them than Atlanta did. The Hawks did make some down the stretch to get to 8, but still 8 of 37 is brutal. That's obviously not the entire story, but the Hawks really got killed at three-point range in this game. They shot pretty well in twos, 57%, actually had almost double the free throw attempts of the Nets in this game and shot well on them, 21-23. Didn't turn the ball over a ton in this game either, so the bona fides around the perimeter and sort of the margins were not that bad for the Hawks in this game, but basically they got smoked in just putting the ball in the basket. And sometimes in the NBA, that's what's going to happen to you when you can't make shots. It's hard to win when you make 7 fewer threes than your opponent. It was really, again, more lopsided than that for most of the night. And the Nets were good, but the Hawks just missed a bunch of open shots in this game. I thought the Hawks had a pretty decent process game offensively. Defensively, not so much. Although Trey did struggle pretty badly. We'll come back to that later on. And obviously, when Trey's not his best or anything close to his best, the Hawks are going to have some issues offensively because he's so important, has such a high usage, etc. But guys like John Collins and Sadiq Bey and Jalen Johnson could not make shots in this game. Collins, 0 of 6 from 3. Bey was 2 of 7. I think he started out 1 of 5, 1 of 6, something like that. Trey 0 of 5 from 3, and then Jalen was 0 of 3. So guys that you're going to leave open, obviously Bey's more of a shooter than the other two guys, but they just could not make their catch and shoots in this one. And aside from AJ Griffin, who shot 3 or 4 off the bench, it was pretty rough almost across the board for Atlanta on the offensive end of the floor. And the shot making was the biggest problem, but it was not the only thing that happened for Atlanta in this game. Some more pregame context real quickly before we get to the actual game flow. The Nets are pretty much healthy. Ben Simmons is out, but he's been out for large swaths of the season. It doesn't really help them at this point in time anyway. As I mentioned before, Hunter missed this game with knee swelling. Notably, that's the game. That's actually the knee cost him a game last week as well. So keep an eye on that. And the Hawks, by the way, are now 3-9 without Hunter in the lineup this year. Now, that's not all him, but they're 35-30 with him and 3-9 without him. So that's partly, and I think maybe mostly, the fact that the Hawks don't have anybody else on the perimeter defensively. But Hunter is important. I know it was a big topic on Twitter today that I kind of started, I guess, on some level about how important he actually is and how well he's playing and the expectations and all that stuff. That's for another day. But in general, he is important to this team defensively, and that definitely shows when he's on the floor. And then Jalen Johnson, though, did return after 7 games on the shelf with injury. That was good to see him back in the lineup. Didn't play incredibly well, but it was good to just have him out there. He rebounded the ball well and showed off some of his skill set that he certainly adds that nobody else really can match on this Hawks roster. As far as the game is concerned, the Hawks were effectively coin flips in this game coming in. They were 1-point favorites at one point today. It was 1-point underdogs at one point. It was kind of like right back and forth in that coin flip range. But this is not a game. I'll be the first to tell you when the Hawks are supposed to lose a game. On the road, yes. But Brooklyn has been a little bit shaky in recent days. They have a better record than the Hawks do, but this is a very different team than it was early in the season. And in general, the Hawks were not supposed to be getting blown out in this game. And by the second half, it was an actual blowout, and we'll get into how that all transpired. But big picture, it's not a great loss for the Hawks. Have they had worse losses? Sure they have. But this is a winnable game. It also was impactful in the standings, as we'll come back to later on, because Chicago won tonight, and the Hawks are in a pretty dire spot now in the play-in race, which we'll touch on. But a lot of pressure. It wasn't the biggest game remaining, but it was certainly on the short list of those games. And with only 6 games remaining, and the Hawks hovering around 500, every game is big, and they just did not play all that well in this spot, and it was not good enough after a strong first quarter. All right, we'll get into the game now as far as the back and forth is concerned. But first, a word from our sponsors on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The stretch run is here in the NBA. The Final Four is coming this weekend in Houston. It's perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. New customers at FanDuel get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 with FanDuel. That means bonus bets coming back to you if your first bet does not win. Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app right now. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Man, anything you're looking for in the sports world. That includes point spreads and totals and money lines, player props, futures, live betting, and much more. The Hawks return to action on Sunday against Dallas. FanDuel will have all what you need in pregame lines, as well as all the live betting action in the middle of the game if you want to go that route. And from there, how many more exclusive bets at FanDuel? And FanDuel also has the opportunity to combine those bets together for bigger payouts with a same-game parlay. Don't miss the chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. One more time, that is FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, which is a proper partner of the NBA. All right, and ironically, after the Hawks had the strong first quarter overall, it was not the start of the game. Bey started in place of Hunter. It was Bogey last time, so a little bit of a notable change there. But the Hawks missed 10 straight shots early in the first quarter to go down by a 12-4 margin. Defensively, they actually held up okay at the start, and the shot quality was okay, just didn't make shots as they kind of did in the entire game. Bogey came in for Trey as usual. Trey actually sat longer than usual in the first quarter. He actually sat the rest of the first quarter, and he had a pretty rough game all the way through. It kind of started out at the top. I'm not sure if he was the plan was to have him sit that long. Murray was playing better. Maybe that's why they stuck with that lineup, but that was notable. Also, Griffin and Congo came in after that, and then Jalen Johnson was the 9th man. So no huge surprises with Hunter out of the lineup. It was the 9 guys that you would expect, and then a lot of bench clearing time at the end of this game. After missing those 10 shots in a row earlier, they made 5 in a row after that in the quarter, including 4 jumpers in a row, a 12-3 run to take the lead. Bey and Murray engineered that. I thought Bey played pretty well in the early going. The Hawks made 11 of their last 15 shots in the first quarter after that rough start. Bogey and AJ hit threes off the bench. Murray had 13 points in the first quarter and then cooled off from there, as you probably would guess. But the Hawks did a good job pushing tempo in the first quarter. 2 turnovers only. It was a good play quarter overall. But unfortunately, they lost the rest of the game by about 25 points. So there you go. It was Trey plus the bench unit in the second. A nice ATO play that actually ended up with a Kongwu dunking from Bogey. And the Hawks had good shots, again, all the way through the second quarter, but were missing a lot of them. Did have 10 rebounds in the first quarter and a half, but Trey didn't score for like 20 minutes. Was 1 of 9 from the floor in the first half. Brooklyn had a sort of a 7-0 run late in the quarter to take the lead. The Hawks played a little bit of small ball, but turned the ball over twice in a row, and that didn't kind of stop that. But offensively in the quarter, it was pretty rough. There were 7 of 24 from the floor in the second. Pretty rough stuff there. 22 to 10, extended run by the Nets at the end of the first half. Put the Hawks down at the break after they led for the majority of the first half. Murray 15 points, Conway had 10, but there were 4-22 from 3 in the first half. And defensively, it wasn't awful, but it would certainly get worse after halftime. The Nets were red hot in the third quarter. They had 25 points in the first 6 minutes of the third, including 9 of 11 from the floor and 4 threes. Defensively, it wasn't that bad by the numbers, but obviously Brooklyn made a bunch of shots. The Hawks were actually okay offensively, actually, in the third quarter for a while, but it wasn't enough to keep up with the red hot Nets. They were down by 20 with about 16 minutes to go. Couldn't make shots. I referenced this once before, but the Hawks, again, were 4 of 26 from 3 at one point, and Brooklyn at the same time was 14 of 26. Collins was rough. He had 0 of 6 at that point. Bay and Trey were 1 of 10 to start the game from 3. It was just it was basically everyone except other than AJ, maybe Bogey, that was just missing everything. AJ made 2 threes late in the third when nothing else was going well whatsoever for the Hawks. But I already kind of knew it wasn't the Hawks' night. But Mikal Bridges hit a shot from behind the backboard after the Hawks got back with 15 points. It was as close as they ever got in the second half. And that opened up a 7-0 run by the Nets. And generally speaking, it was a buzzsaw from Brooklyn in the third. 42 points on 24 possessions. Now, do the math on that. That's 175 offensive rating in the third quarter by the Brooklyn Nets. And the Hawks didn't help that. Brooklyn was red hot. The Hawks shot 55% from the field in the third quarter and lost the quarter by 18 points. That's hard to do because of the turnover battle going in Brooklyn's way and the three-point battle obviously going heavily in Brooklyn's way. Offensively, it was better in the fourth to start things off. They had a tough upgrade on a flagrant foul call on a Kongwu early in the fourth quarter. It was 16 with like 8.5 minutes to go, so it wasn't dead. But then as soon as that happened, it was a 9-2 run by the Nets, and it was basically over. They went small briefly to kind of throw a Hail Mary, and that was kind of the end of that. And with 4 minutes to go, Snyder decided to pump the game, which I definitely agreed with that decision at the time. And it was pretty rough, we'll say. So, big picture, the first half was competitive. The Hawks didn't shoot well at the end of the first half, but you could sort of live with that. You're down by 4 points at the halftime break. But the third quarter, yes, there was some variance in there for sure. But this Hawks, if the Nets had been trying all the way through, it could have been even uglier, honestly. And again, Brooklyn, I think, was 3-9 in their last 12, something like that, coming into the game. They've been struggling pretty badly. And not a whole lot to add in terms of that. But we'll get into kind of how the players performed in this game. But first, a word from our sponsors on the podcast. All right, and the player evaluation portion of the podcast is going to paint a pretty ugly picture, as you might imagine. We'll start with the bench, which was the brighter spot in this game. Okongwu had 12 points, 6 rebounds, and 2 blocks in 19 minutes. Thought he played well, had some foul trouble, as he almost always does, but he wasn't great, but played fine. AJ Griffin had 11 points on 8 shots. He was their best shooter in this game, 2 rebounds and an assist. Didn't play incredibly well, but did make shots, and nobody else did. Jalen Johnson returned, 6 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists. Did have 2 turnovers and missed all 3 of his 3-point shots, as he was not alone there because everybody else was missing those shots too. Good to have Jalen back after a lengthy absence, and he definitely helps things in certain aspects in terms of pushing the ball and playing defense on the perimeter, etc., especially without Hunter. And then Bogey played decently, I thought, 12 points on 7 shots, had 5 assists, which was as many as anybody other than Trey on the roster. Had a steal, had 2 of 5 from 3. Thought he played fine offensively, and the bench lineups worked out decently well. It's kind of been crazy to watch because I know people have short memories, but for the majority, I'd say the vast majority of this season, the Hawks starting lineup was really good. And in the last few weeks, it's been the absolute opposite of that. So I'm not really sure what changed, to be honest with you. But the bench has been playing very well, and that was the case in this game. And I thought for the bench, it would have gotten out of hand in a hurry. To the starters, speaking of that, we'll go to Capella first. He played the least, 20 minutes, 6.6 rebounds, and a steal for Clint. I think he was not as bad as some, nor was he great. He was kind of a little bit slow of foot in this one. Didn't dominate the game. Wasn't terrible either, but just didn't have his best game at all. John Collins had 5 points in 28 minutes, 2 of 10 from the floor, 0 of 6 from 3. He came into this game shooting much better from 3 in recent days. In fact, he was 13 of his last 27, which is 48% from 3. And then almost right as you think that he's sort of found it again from 3-point range, 0 of 6. And I think 4 of them, maybe 5 of them were really good looks. So a bad shooting night's going to happen. I don't think he played as badly as those numbers indicate, but still got to make shots at some point. No question about that. He was only one of the guys who missed shots, but he certainly missed some open ones. The Hawks definitely needed him to make. Saddiq Bey had a decent game. Defensively, he got cooked a little bit, as you might expect, when Bridges and Johnson, et cetera, go off. 16 points, though, 7 rebounds, did have 2 steals on 14 shots. I don't think he played great, but he was better than some for sure in this one. DeJounte had 21 points, 13 in the first quarter, and definitely cooled off from there. He was better, but not anything fantastic at all. And defensively, he was a problem, as a lot of guys were. And then Trey at the end, Trey was awful in this game by Trey standards. Obviously, he still has appeal when he's just not making shots, but he was 3 of 12 from the floor, 0 of 5 from 3, 6 assists, yes, but 0 rebounds, 2 turnovers is not that bad, but minus 33, just no juice at all. He looked kind of a step slow, kind of out of it in this game. There wasn't any rest concern. I'm not sure if he's banged up or something like that, but he was really bad for him in this game. And look, it was not only Trey, it was not only Collins, it was not only anybody else. Capella, Murray was okay, all that stuff. But like when Trey's bad, the offense is going to struggle. And then you throw in bad 3-point shooting on top of that, and it becomes like dire. You can't, this Hawks team, with the way it's built, can't really navigate a bad Trey game and a bad 3-point shooting game at the same night. And the Hawks had exactly that happen to them in this game. Hopefully Trey is bouncing back on Sunday. Hopefully they make some more threes between Collins and Bey and Johnson and even Trey and Murray. But it was pretty rough along the way in this game. We're also a little bit shorter than usual on today's podcast. I'm fully aware of that. But, that's one of those things where I'm on the road in Houston covering the Final Four. And also this was a pretty maddening experience. But at the end of the podcast, and we'll get into this now, the standings are not painting the best possible picture for the Hawks at this point. Now, we already knew that because of the record. But Miami was off tonight, so that's something. But the Hawks are now 4 back of the Nets without the tiebreaker with 5 games to go. So basically any faint 1% thought of getting to the 6th seed is probably gone. They have to win out and have a lot of help to get the 6th seed. So that's kind of cross that off. Now, the 7th seed is still kind of in play. If they win out, they're 2 behind Miami, I should say. But that's not one that you love, and I think you kind of have to cross that out too. So I think realistically, again, not mathematically, but realistically, you're looking for the best case scenario within reason is the 8th seed for the Hawks at this point. They're tied for 8th with Toronto at this moment because Toronto lost tonight in Philadelphia. That was a helpful result for Atlanta. The Raptors have been playing better than the Hawks for a while, but the Hawks do have, it's tied, and that's not too bad of a setup. Washington, though, lost to Orlando. So this is the best thing of the night for the Hawks if you want to find something, is that the Wizards lost. So the Hawks essentially, not all the way, but within something crazy would have to happen for them to fall out of the play-in at this point. They are 4 games ahead of the Wizards with 5 to play. So that's, if the Hawks were to go 0-5, they might be in some trouble. But even then, I think they probably would be in at some point. Now, the Bulls are the one to look at. So right now, the Bulls are the 10 seed. They are a game back of the Hawks. But they won tonight. They beat Charlotte. And the Hawks currently trail the Bulls 2-1 in the season series. They play the Bulls on Tuesday. So without question, that is the biggest game of the season for the Hawks, is Tuesday. Now, I know obviously they play the Mavs on Sunday, and the Mavs are a rival for fans, and Luka and Trey and all that stuff. That will be attention. It's a Sunday night game. That'll be a lot of attention. I promise you right now, the bigger game on the court in terms of impact is the game on Tuesday against Chicago. It's on the road, etc. But if the Hawks were to lose that one, they would lose the tiebreaker to Chicago and probably be tied in the standings. So that's going to be a huge one to circle. Regardless, though, the Hawks have no margin for error. If they were, let's say hypothetically they go 2-3 on the stretch, they're going to probably be 9 or 10. So they have to win games. If you're not remembering the sort of play-in format, if you're a 9 or 10, you have to win twice to get in. If there's a 10 seed, you have to win twice on the road to get in. If you're the 9 seed, we should get a home game in the first game. But the Hawks were the 9 seed last year and they managed to emerge. But different situation now. They're not playing as well as they were at the end of last year, etc. So anyway, not to paint a tough picture, but the next game on the agenda is Sunday evening against Dallas. On the bright side, Dallas has not been playing particularly good basketball. In fact, Dallas at this moment is out of the play-in in the West, which is honestly inconceivable, but that's happened. They play Miami on Saturday, so the Hawks have a slight advantage in that one because Dallas has to travel from Miami to Atlanta on a back-to-back. So that's a good spot for the Hawks with Dallas not playing well, but still that's a game that you cannot take for granted whatsoever if you are the Hawks. And then from there, we'll get into the schedule later on in the week. But 5 games to go, and they'll have to win all 5 of them to get to get 43 wins from last year. Tough spot there, and a rough night overall for the Hawks. So that's Friday night for you. We'll sign off here, but please subscribe to the podcast. Please tell your friends about the show. If you are a Hawks fan, I definitely thank you for listening all the way through the podcast, but also please download and subscribe and rate and review. That definitely is very helpful. Check out the show on Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Check out me on Twitter if you want to at BT Roll. Also my written content over at Patreon, patreon.com/BT Rowland. Thank you as always for listening. Enjoy your weekend. We'll be back again after the game on Sunday.